I thought after 43 years of marriage, I'd already heard every way a man could be pushed aside. You learn the patterns after that long, the sighs that come before criticism, the tone that sounds calm, but means a decision has already been made. You learn how people say your name when they're tired of you, but don't want to admit it. But I wasn't ready for this. Last Thursday morning, Margaret sat across from me at our kitchen table. Same table we'd eaten at for decades. Same nicks in the wood. Same coffee rings I never bothered sanding out because there was always something more important to do. She folded her hands slowly, carefully, like she was about to deliver bad news to a stranger. "Robert," she said, not looking at me, "I think it's best if you don't come to the cottage this Christmas." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. "What do you mean, don't come?" I asked, setting my mug down with both hands so I wouldn't spill it. "Don't come when?" "This Christmas," she said again. Same tone, calm, reasonable, like she was canceling a dentist appointment. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. "The kids think, well, we all think, it might be easier if you stayed home this year." Easier. That word hit me harder than anything else. "You've been so difficult lately," she added. Difficult. It didn't land. It just hung there between us, heavy and sour. "Difficult how?" I asked. She sighed. That deep, practiced sigh she'd been using more and more over the past year. The kind that makes you feel like you're explaining yourself to someone who's already decided you're wrong. "You know," she said, "at Thanksgiving, you argued with Trevor about his business idea. At Emma's birthday, you made that comment about her boyfriend's tattoos. The kids are tired of walking on eggshells. Trevor, our son, 41, divorced, marketing job, always chasing the next big thing. Emma, 38, social worker, big heart, poor taste in men." "I was having a conversation," I said. "Trevor asked what I thought, and you told him it was impractical." "Because it was impractical," I said. "He wanted to quit a stable job to start a podcast about cryptocurrency." Margaret pressed her lips together like I'd just proven her point. "That's exactly what I mean, Robert. You can't just be supportive. Everything has to be your opinion, your judgment." I looked at her and tried to remember when my opinions became a liability. "We met in 1979 at the University of Toronto. Married young. Built a life the way people were supposed to back then. 3 kids, a house in North York, respectable careers. The kind of life other people pointed at and called solid. I worked 35 years as a civil engineer for the city. Bridges, transit lines, infrastructure nobody notices until it fails. Systems where mistakes don't get second chances. I didn't deal in fantasies. I dealt in reality. So that's it," I said. "After 43 years, I'm uninvited from Christmas." "It's not forever," she said quickly. "Just this year. Give everyone some space." She reached across the table like she might take my hand, then stopped halfway, like she'd thought better of it. "Maybe you could spend it with your brother." My brother Paul lived in Vancouver. We talked twice a year if nothing went wrong. "Right," I said. That night, I lay awake while Margaret slept beside me, breathing evenly like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just erased me from my own family's tradition. The house was quiet, too quiet. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the cottage, the tradition we started when Trevor was 5. Snow on the lake, the fireplace, Margaret's tourtière, the kids tearing open presents, grandkids running around in recent years. And now I was being cut out of it calmly, politely, like I was the problem everyone had finally agreed to solve. The next morning, Margaret was gone before I woke up. Book club. There was a note on the counter. "Didn't want to wake you. There's coffee." I spent most of that day in my basement workshop. I'd been spending more time down there lately. It was the only place in the house that still felt like mine. Everything else had slowly become Margaret's territory. Her systems, her rules, her version of order. The basement was different. Tools, wires, half-finished projects, dust in the air, the smell of metal and old wood. Things that made sense. I'd been working on something down there for 8 months, something nobody in my family knew about. Not that they would have cared. To them, I was just old Robert, puttering, keeping busy, avoiding real life. But this was real, more real than anything I'd done in years. I didn't tell anyone what I was working on. Not Margaret, not Trevor, not Emma. Not because it was some secret worth protecting, but because somewhere along the line, my enthusiasm had turned into background noise. It's a strange thing, realizing your excitement has an expiration date in your own home. I worked mornings and nights in the basement, sometimes afternoons, when the house was empty in that particular way that tells you nobody is thinking about you. The computer fan hummed steadily. The old space heater clicked on and off. My hands smelled like dust, solder, and cold coffee. Margaret would come downstairs occasionally and stand at the top of the steps. "What are you doing down there so much?" she'd ask. "Working on something," I'd say. She'd nod, polite, distracted. Later, I found out she told her book club friends I was keeping busy, the way people talk about retirees who need hobbies so they don't deteriorate. Trevor laughed when I mentioned I was learning to code. "Dad," he said, shaking his head, "you know there are kids half my age who can't even keep up with that stuff, right?" Emma smiled, trying to soften it. "That's great, Dad," she said. "Keeping your brain active." Active, like it was Sudoku, like it didn't matter. I smiled. I always smiled. That was the role I'd slipped into without noticing. Smile, nod. Don't complicate things. But I kept working. The platform grew slowly at first, then faster once the structure held. Data translation stabilized. Error detection tightened. Coordination timelines started collapsing into something clean and predictable. I tested it on old project datasets I still had access to. The results weren't just good. They were humiliating. Humiliating for an industry that had accepted chaos as normal for decades. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell myself I was onto something special. I treated it the same way I'd treated bridges and transit systems my entire career. Make it work. Make it safe. Make it boring. In November, I showed it to David. We met for coffee downtown. He was halfway through complaining about a client when I turned my laptop toward him. "Remember that conversation we had back in March?" I said. "I've been working on something." He stopped talking for 5 minutes. He didn't say a word, just stared at the screen, scrolling, leaning closer, then sitting back like he'd misjudged the distance to something dangerous. "Robert," he said finally, looking up slowly. "Do you understand what this is?" "A coordination platform," I said. He shook his head. "No," he said. "This is what people have been trying and failing to build for 20 years. I shrugged. "The principles were already there. I just translated them." He laughed, but it wasn't amused. It was breathless. "You built this in 8 months," he said. "By yourself. Give or take." David leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "I know people," he said quietly. "Investors. Firms. Serious money. This isn't a side project." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "What do you want to do?" He shot back. That question landed harder than I expected, because for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't telling me to calm down or be quieter or more agreeable. They were asking, "Show it to whoever you want," I said. "I'm not attached." That wasn't entirely true, but I didn't need him to know that. 3 weeks later, David called with a tone I'd never heard from him before. "Apex Ventures wants to meet you," he said. "Toronto-based, construction technology specialists, serious people with serious money." The meetings were technical, direct, no buzzwords. They asked questions that told me they understood exactly what they were looking at. I answered all of them. I'd spent 35 years in this industry. I didn't need pitch decks. I had scars. They didn't want to invest. They wanted to buy, outright acquisition. Me on board as chief technical advisor, fast-tracked development, expansion plans already mapped out. The number they mentioned made my ears ring. 7 figures up front, performance-based payouts after. I didn't react, didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I went home, ate dinner with Margaret, listened to her talk about a book she was reading, and said nothing. Not because I was hiding it, because I wanted to see something. I wanted to see how long it would take before anyone noticed I was still becoming someone new. Nobody did. Christmas crept closer. Margaret packed for the cottage the way she always did. Lists, careful folding, assumptions of continuity. She packed 2 scarves for me. Just in case, she said. In case of what? I asked. In case you change your mind. I didn't. I wasn't going to show up uninvited to my own family Christmas like a man begging to be tolerated. On December 23rd, she left. I watched the car disappear down the street. 43 years of tradition rolling away without me inside it. The house went quiet. That silence didn't hurt the way I expected. It clarified. Trevor called on Christmas Eve. Hey, Dad. Just wanted to say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. You doing okay? I'm fine. Mom said you decided not to come. Decided. That's one way to put it, I said. There was an awkward pause. Maybe next year, right? Maybe. After we hung up, I poured myself a scotch and sat in the living room. The tree was lit. The decorations were perfect. Everything looked exactly like Christmas was supposed to look. And for the first time in months, nobody was disappointed in me. Nobody sighed when I spoke. Nobody waited for me to finish so they could move on. It was just me, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and the steady ticking of the clock. At 12 minutes past midnight, transitioning from Christmas into Boxing Day, my phone rang. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my phone rang. The clock on the microwave read 12:12 a.m. Trevor. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Not because I was angry, because something in me already knew this call would change the shape of everything. Dad? His voice was off. Too tight. Too sharp. Like he'd just run up a flight of stairs he wasn't prepared for. What's wrong? I asked. Dad, what did you do? That question again. Not what happened. Not are you okay. What did you do? My chest tightened. Just briefly. What are you talking about? My phone just lit up, he said. CBC News. It says you sold some kind of construction technology platform to Apex Ventures. He stopped mid-sentence. I could hear his breathing shift. Dad, he whispered. It says $8.5 million. I sat down, not because I was dizzy, because that moment deserved gravity. Oh, I said. Oh? His voice cracked. That's all you're going to say? It's real, I said. Initial buyout. There are performance targets. How much more? He asked, barely above a whisper. Could be more over time. Silence. Then, I need to call you back. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, Emma called. Then Margaret. Then Trevor again. Then numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. Not to punish anyone. Not to enjoy it. I just needed the noise to settle so I could hear myself think. I poured another scotch and sat there while my phone buzzed itself tired. The house felt different now. Same walls, same furniture, but the air had weight to it. By morning, there were 47 text messages, 12 voicemails, and 6 emails waiting for me. Most of them were apologies. Some of them were questions. A few were panic. Margaret came home that afternoon alone. She walked into the house without knocking, like she always had, then stopped in the doorway like she didn't recognize the place anymore. Robert, she said, why didn't you tell me? I looked up from the kitchen table. Tell you what, don't play games, she said sharply. The technology, the deal, any of it. I studied her. Really studied her. She was wearing the sweater I'd bought her last Christmas, the one she'd smiled at, thanked me for, and then never worn, until now. Would you have been interested? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That's not fair. When was the last time anyone in this family asked what I was working on? I said. Not out of politeness, out of interest. She sat down slowly. You could have said something. I did, I said. For years. She started crying then. Quietly. Not theatrically. Just tears sliding down her face like gravity had finally caught up. I thought you were stuck, she said. I thought you were afraid of change. I nodded. I thought so too, until I wasn't. That's when the power shifted. Not because of the money, because I finally saw the truth. They didn't stop listening because I was wrong. They stopped listening because it was easier. That night, after Margaret went upstairs, I went back down to the basement and opened my laptop. Not the platform, the paperwork, accounts, deeds, retirement funds, the cottage, the will we'd written years ago and never touched again, because stability makes people lazy. I didn't rage. I organized, separated assets, quietly, legally. Clean lines. No drama. Updated documents. Clarified ownership. Removed assumptions. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting myself because I'd learned something important. Being invisible and being financially exposed at the same time is a dangerous position. Trevor showed up 2 days later, alone. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. "Dad," he said, "can we talk?" I nodded. He sat down across from me. Same table, same chair. "I had no idea," he said, "about any of it." "I know. We treated you like you were done," he said, voice breaking. "Like you weren't still becoming someone." I watched him carefully. "And now?" I asked. "And now I realize how wrong that was," he said. "Completely." I leaned back. "I didn't build that platform to earn your respect," I said. "I built it because it needed to exist. Your respect should have been there regardless." He nodded. "I know. From now on," I continued, "this relationship changes. I'm not shrinking anymore. I'm not filtering my thoughts, so everyone else can stay comfortable." "I understand," he said quickly. "We'll see," I replied. Emma came next. Tears, apologies, promises. I let her talk. Then I said, "If this only happened because money forced you to reconsider me, then nothing really changed." She didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, everything recalibrated. Margaret stopped managing me. The kids started listening. Not politely, actually listening. And the funny thing was, the more I stopped chasing their approval, the more they leaned in. The deal finalized officially. Apex brought me on as chief technical advisor. I got an office downtown, a team, real authority. For the first time in years, I felt aligned. Not vindicated, aligned. And the nuclear revenge? It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't the payout. It was watching the people who'd quietly erased me realize, all at once, that I had never needed their permission to matter. What surprised me most wasn't how fast everything changed. It was how quickly everyone adjusted once they realized I wasn't going back to the old version of myself. Respect, I learned, isn't negotiated. It's enforced by consistency. Apex moved fast. January came with meetings, whiteboards, engineers who asked real questions and waited for real answers. They didn't care how old I was. They cared whether the system worked. I gave them what I'd always given my profession: clarity, structure, zero patience for nonsense. The team listened. Not because I raised my voice, because every time they tried to cut a corner, I showed them where it would fail 6 months later. Every time they proposed something flashy, I asked how it behaved under stress. By February, "Let's ask Robert," became a default phrase in meetings. That never gets old when it's earned. At home, the shift was quieter. Margaret stopped correcting me mid-sentence, stopped rephrasing my words to sound softer, more palatable. She asked questions instead, not leading ones, curious ones. "What are you thinking?" she asked one night. Not, "Why are you like this?" That mattered. Therapy started in January. Her idea. Dr. Kapoor's office smelled like old books and lemon tea. 43 years of marriage doesn't untangle neatly. You don't fix that with apologies and good intentions. "When did you start feeling unheard?" Dr. Kapoor asked me. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "When I realized nobody asked what I thought unless they already planned to ignore it." Margaret cried. Again. "I thought you were content," she said. I was quiet. I replied, "That's not the same thing." Trevor changed in a way I didn't expect. He stopped performing. No big declarations. No dramatic gestures. He started doing the work. Research before opinions. Questions before assumptions. In February, he came to me with a proposal. Marketing integration for the platform. Not an idea. A plan. Data. Market analysis. Risks identified. Old me would have said yes immediately. This time, I took 3 days. Reviewed it like an investor. Like someone whose time had value. When I finally said it was good, he didn't celebrate. He exhaled. That told me everything. Emma took a different route. She asked if she could help without touching the core business. She wanted to focus on community impact. How coordination failures hurt neighborhoods. How infrastructure projects displaced people who never got a voice. It wasn't profitable. It wasn't flashy. It was real. I approved an advisory board. Emma chaired it. She listened the way she always had, but now she paired it with systems thinking. She didn't need my money. She wanted my respect. And that finally went both ways. I revised the will again that spring, not out of anger, out of clarity. Clear allocations, clear conditions, nothing punitive, nothing dramatic. If respect remained while I was alive, everything flowed naturally. If it didn't, the structure was already in place. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten. I didn't need to. Margaret found out changes had been made. Not details, just that something shifted. She asked me one night, "Do you still want this marriage?" I thought carefully before answering. "I want a marriage where I'm not erased," I said. "If that's possible, then yes." She nodded slowly. "I'm trying," she said. "I see that," I replied. "Just understand something. I won't shrink again." She didn't argue. That was new. By summer, the headlines had moved on. There's always another founder, another scandal, another younger face. I liked the quiet. I wasn't interested in fame. I'd spent my life building things people only noticed when they failed. That was enough. What I wanted now was control. Not over people, over my time, my energy, my voice. And for the first time, all three belonged to me. By the time Christmas came around again, everything looked normal from the outside. Same cottage, same lake frozen solid, same fireplace crackling like it always had, same tree in the corner, lights reflecting off the windows like a postcard version of family togetherness. But it wasn't the same, and that was the point. We arrived together this time. All of us. No tension-filled silences in the car. No forced cheer. Just quiet conversation that didn't feel like it was being carefully managed. Emma brought her boyfriend, the one with the tattoos I'd commented on the year before. Turned out he was a paramedic. Calm. Grounded. The kind of man who runs toward problems while other people look away. Trevor brought his girlfriend too, an architect. She asked me real questions about the platform within 5 minutes of meeting me. Not to impress me, because she was curious. Margaret moved through the kitchen without orchestrating everything. She didn't correct, didn't hover. She just participated. That difference was subtle and permanent. On Christmas Eve, after dinner, Trevor asked if I wanted to step outside with him. We stood on the deck overlooking the lake. Snow stretched out in every direction, quiet and unbroken. Our breath hung in the air. "Dad," he said, staring at the ice. "I need to tell you something." "All right." "Last Christmas, when Mom said you weren't coming, I was relieved." He swallowed. "I thought it would be easier without you. Less tension, less arguing, less complication." I said nothing. "It was the worst Christmas of my life," he continued. "Not because you weren't there, because we made you not be there." His voice cracked then. My son, 42 years old. crying like something fundamental had finally collapsed. I kept thinking about every time you gave advice and I rolled my eyes. Every time I changed the subject when you spoke. Every time I treated you like an obligation instead of someone who actually cared. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. "The platform is incredible," he said. "It changed my career, my life, but that's not why I'm sorry." He looked at me then. Really looked. "I'm sorry because even if you'd never built it, you still deserved better than how we treated you." That was when I hugged him. Not because the words were perfect, because they were finally honest. Later that night, Emma sat beside me by the fire. "I used to think you were just fixed," she said quietly. "Like who you were was finished. I never imagined you were still becoming someone." I stared into the flames. "I was," I said. "You just weren't looking." Margaret joined us later. No speeches, no tears. She rested her hand on mine and left it there. That was enough. When everyone went to bed, I stayed up, not drinking, not reminiscing, working, laptop open, notes scattered. Early sketches of a new extension to the platform. Predictive infrastructure maintenance. Systems that don't just coordinate, but anticipate failure before it becomes visible. I didn't tell anyone, not because I felt invisible, because I did not need permission anymore. At 67, I wasn't winding down. I wasn't reflecting on a life completed. I was building again. My phone buzzed. A message from David Chen. Saw the quarterly numbers. The platform's exceeding every projection. "You built something special. Robert, Merry Christmas." I set the phone aside. The fire crackled. Snow fell softly outside. Somewhere upstairs, my family slept in a cottage that had almost lost me for good. But I was still here, still thinking, still working, still growing. And that was the real victory. Not the money, not the headlines, not even the reconciliation. The victory was realizing I'd spent 67 years becoming someone worth listening to. And finally, I believed it myself.